Uh, we have Professor Uday Shankar from IIT Kharagpur, and he has done his PhD from Delhi University, and he has taught in a few foreign universities before, and he's a uh, renowned person and authority on constitutional law. He has written and edited couple of books on constitutional law. So we have the privilege of having him, and I'm very glad that he is there because is suffering little with his back pain these days. So, but he agreed to continue today with his session. So, without wasting time, the floor is yours, and please feel free uh, uh, to restrict the timing if required.
Thank you, Vikram, and thanks to GLA University for extending this invite to me. I congratulate all the participants who have come forward to enroll in this course. The issue pertaining to child and the child rights are gaining prominence in these days. One significant reason which appears to me is valuing child as important human resource, and another is sort of transformation from the point where we have begun at the time of the making of the constitution and present scenario, and how do I see the transformation is the very subject matter of child and child welfare was somehow been seen or been regulated on the lines of the employment of the child in one or the other sector. So that was a kind of necessity at that point of time, where employment of child in different vocation was considered as a kind of need of the hour or a compulsion, considering the poor economic health of the country as well as of the individual. So when you look at the making of the Indian Constitution, you'd find that much focus has been given on how to minimize the exploitation of child as a labor, which truly highlights that what was the reality at that point of time, and how the makers of the constitution have dealt with that. Now, as on today, we do not want to see them as an important integral part of the workforce. Children are being seen as an important stakeholder in the development of the nation, and accordingly the narrative is also being developed. Accordingly, we are trying to reconcile the conflicting propositions, if any. when you look at the way the subject matter on child has been dealt in India, you'd find that this one subject is been dealt looking at the very idea of extending protection to the child. Who shall extend the protection? The state, the just give me a second, I'll be back. Yeah, sorry. So the what I was telling is that the whole idea, the whole approach started developing from this point, that who shall protect the child, or who shall look after the welfare of the child. And in this process, industrialization played a very significant role, because I mean, when you look at the need of the child to supplement the workforce, whether it is in a pre-industrialized society or when the society started accepting the reality of industrialization, it is the factor of employment of the child which started playing a significant role. And in that process, earlier, when what was seen as the involvement of child in family business, and thus the responsibility on the family also to look after the welfare of the child, shifted from family to the state, because they were started being engaged not only in the family business but in other businesses also, wherein a sort of categorization was made that what is not hazardous, let us allow child to get employed. और जब आप चिल्ड्रन को एज ए वर्कफोर्स देखेंगे और वो फैमिली बिजनेस के बियॉन्ड देखेंगे, तो ऑब्वियसली द स्टेट विल हैव अ रिस्पांसिबिलिटी, and that's how state come into the picture. So the idea of parents looking after the welfare and the idea of state looking after somewhere gets revolved from this very fact that child was seen as an important participants in economic activities of the country or society, in whatever way you may look at it. Against this background, when you look at, I mean, the way the child right needs to be evolved, how it should be involved, what shall be the factors to be looked into. There are certain attributes identified with child rights. Rights of special protection and care, rights to be associated with biological parents, right to enjoy human identity, rights to get basic necessities of the life like food, health, education. Then right connected with autonomy of an individual, that how to view children in the decision making process, what is best from the children's viewpoint, and then children being physically, mentally and emotionally free from abuse. And all these aspects started being talked about, as I said, only when it was being realized that on the one hand, the engagement of child in the industry is a necessity, but on the other hand, their welfare is also the responsibility of the state. So parents were being considered as responsible for child welfare. Along with that, society was, involved in child welfare. And then a third dimension came where the state has a role to play now. And perhaps you may connect it with the way the industrial society has developed. In 1924, there was a Declaration of Geneva, which made it very clear that care and protection of children was no longer exclusive responsibilities of families or communities. This 1924 declaration made it very clear that world as a whole had a legitimate interest in the welfare of all children. So when you look at the Indian Constitution and the way it has been designed in, I will, for the purpose of the discussion in this course, divide the approach of the Indian Constitution on the issue of child on these following headings. One, I will talk about non-discrimination, that is Article 15, which is a subset of equality clause. Second, I will discuss under the heading of child labor, because that's what one of the focuses of the Constitution. Third, I will discuss from the perspective of education. And fourth, I will try to explain that how the child welfare has been part of the subject matter for engaging constructively by the judiciary. जुडिशरी ने चाइल्ड के इश्यूज को बड़ा कंस्ट्रक्टिवली डील किया है 21 के अंदर, be it the matter of adoption, be it the matter of giving a guideline to constitute welfare fund, or engagement of child in the construction industry. The judiciary has really made phenomenal intervention. Now, with the scheme, when you look at the scheme of equality clause in India, it is a unique experiment done by the makers. मुझे बताया गया है कि इस ऑडियंस में लॉ स्टूडेंट्स के अलावा भी दूसरे डिसिप्लिन के भी स्टूडेंट्स हैं, तो उनके जानकारी के लिए मैं थोड़ा इलॉबरेट करके बताऊं कि जो इक्वालिटी क्लॉज का जो स्कीम है इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में, अगर आप उसको देखेंगे, there are 5 provisions under that heading. Article 14 is there, 15 is there, 16 is there, 17 is there, and 18 is there. And what does it signify? As a constitutional law student, I find that the makers of the Constitution very clearly spelled out the obligation of the state in detail. They refrained from laying down only a normative norm and left it for the government of the day to take care. Had that been the case, they would have stopped with Article 14. Because 14 talks about equality before law and equal protection of the laws. And that covers a very wide gamut of equality. But Constitution makers ने वो नहीं किया. उन्होंने equality के general proposition को let down करने के साथ साथ उसके finer details को भी देखा. And in that process, they have included 15, which talks about non-discrimination, and talks about 16, 17, and 18, wherein a specific kind of conditions was also discussed in the framework of equality, like abolition of untouchability, abolition of any title. Non-discriminatory clause में 15(3) plays an important role. 15(3) says that nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. तो एक तरफ तो एक डिक्टा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन मेकर्स ने दिया कि भाई स्टेट शैल नॉट डिस्क्रिमिनेट एंड देयर आर ग्राउंड्स व्हिच आर इंडिकेटेड, but at the same time they have accepted the reality and created an exception in favor of vulnerables. exception in favor of weaker section of the society. And through this, a legislative design was accepted that if some special provision is being made for furthering the interest, let it not be assailed on the ground of discrimination. Now, this word special provision has a very valuable connotation. Special here could mean furthering the interest of child, where whatever you are giving to the rest, if you are giving something additional, that would not be unconstitutional. Special here would also mean that if a child is being discriminated only because of the fact that he is a child, that would come under the attack under equality scheme of the Constitution. So look at the very visionary approach of the maker of the Constitution. On the one hand, they have highlighted the significance of non-discriminatory clause. On the other hand, they have allowed the state to also make a special provision what is needed for this vulnerable class. So the issue of child welfare has been a focal point of constitutional deliberation. And which to me appears to be a very promising point. To lay down guiding principle for the state or for non-state actors, or laying down of the responsibility for ensuring the welfare of the child. I mean, in a comprehensive way, be it the state, be it the non-state actors. So I see 15(1) of the Constitution and 15(3) of the Constitution as a part of integrated scheme to achieve a goal of the establishment of egalitarian society. Why egalitarian society? Because it's not only that the state needs to stay away. The state needs to proactively play a role. So a special provision to me appears to be asking the state that you have a responsibility to do, not only from refraining from doing. Because when you talk about the obligation of the state, generally obligation of the state is been seen from the proposition of not to do. For example, I have a freedom of speech and expression. Now I shall be exercising it when the state stays away from my freedom. And that's how the whole development of human rights jurisprudence has taken place, that just to give a brief idea, that when you talk about the civil and political rights, it is largely making the state to not to interfere. So state shall respect my right. And how state shall be doing it? By staying away from the enjoyment of my right. Freedom of speech, equality, life, which falls under the bracket of civil and political rights. Later on, the jurisprudence moved, and then it was also said that this alone cannot be good enough for guaranteeing quality life to individuals. Along with that, you need to promise, you need to provide for basic necessities, food, education, health. And in order to provide this, state needs to play a proactive role. Staying away is not enough. State needs to make a plan. State needs to construct the school. State needs to, employ the people. So there is a resource needed for realizing those rights. So from negative to positive, that's what is the transformation from civil and political rights to socioeconomic rights. And now we talk about the third generation right, where we talk about right to development, right to clean environment. And all these develops on the line of understanding the nature of obligation of the state. And this has been understood by looking at three different obligations: right to respect, right to protect, and right to fulfill. So you take all human rights and you find that all these human rights, they impose this three obligation on the states. Be it equality, be it freedom of speech, or be it right to health or education. These three obligations are there. So a special provision under 15(3) makes it very clear that the state has a responsibility to do certain thing else, certain additional steps are to be taken. And in that regard, you find that laws are being enacted by the state. Taking reference of 15(3). The next one which I thought of discussing with you is child labor. Why child labor? Because that is one of the prominent subject identified by the makers of the constitution and has been found a very clear stipulation in the constitution. When I look at the language of Article 24 of the Constitution, it says, no child below the age of 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory or mine or engaged in any other hazardous employment. look at the language. It says that the child below the age of 14 shall not be allowed to be employed in any factory, in mine, or any other hazardous employment. Hazardous employment, the way it has been, stated in the Constitution, certainly gives an option to give an interpretation that what amounts to hazardous, what doesn't amount to hazardous. Now, when you read this with 39E, Article 39E, 39E is a policy prescription for the state, where it says that the health and the strength of workers, men and women, and the tender age of children are not abused, and that citizens are not forced by economic necessity to enter avocations unsuited to their age or strength. And when you look at 39F, it says that children are given opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity, and that childhood and youth are protected against exploitation and against moral or material abandonment. Now, these two provisions appears to me that it accommodates the hard reality. What was the reality? That children were being considered as the workforce, and there were compulsion to acknowledge them as workforce. And in fact, when you look at the Constituent Assembly debate, you'd not find much discussion on this article. It was approved by the members without much discussion, except one intervention was done by Professor Saxena, wherein he had suggested that increase the age from 14 to 16. Now, one way of looking at it is that if there is no discussion, it indicates that there is an acceptance, there is a consensus on that proposition, that let the child not be employed in any factory or mine or any other hazardous employment. I believe it was a kind of missed opportunity on the part of the makers of the Constitution, on two counts. One, when they have acknowledged education to child as an important constitutional goal under Article 45, they should have avoided including Article 24, because education and labor cannot go together. I am referring to Article 45 and not 21 capital A, because 21 capital A came later on. But 45 was a clear instruction to the state. And so much so that look at the language of 45, which I'll be explaining after a while. 45, only provision in the Constitution which has given a timeline to the government. It says, let the education be done in 10 years. Only provision. Because makers were aware of the fact that education is important to empower the people. But then they tried to reconcile, to my understanding, the two competing, or conflicting interest. On the one hand, they were aware of the fact that economic necessity demands the engagement. On the other hand, they wanted also not to compromise on the value of education, the need, the very necessity of education. And child labor in India is really a matter of concern. As per the statistics shown in 2011 census data, there are around 33 million child laborers in this country, and majority of them, they are from rural segment. And rural, you can very well visualize, it refers to agricultural sector, and which certainly is not considered as hazardous employment. So tacitly, the Constitution acknowledges the engagement of child as laborer in agriculture sector. So they are working as a workforce, but at the same time, there is no direction to the state to do the needful to eliminate that practice. And why I say it's a missed opportunity? Because when you are making a constitution for a new republic, you certainly have necessary command at your disposal to create a revolutionary norm, the way it was displayed in abolition of untouchability, Article 70. If you look at the language of Article 17, you'd end up appreciating the vision of the makers of the Constitution. Untouchability is abolished, and its practice in any form is forbidden. The enforcement of any disability arising out of untouchability shall be an offense punishable in accordance with law. The framers, they decided not only to abolish untouchability, they have also directed the government that what you need to do if it has been practiced. And they said you criminalize the very practice. That's why it says that it has to be declared as an offense punishable under the law. So no option was given to the government that how government would deal, whether it will be a civil matter or it would be a maker said that let it be a criminal matter, let the person be punished. And the same is the case with Article 23 when you look at it. No, 23 talks about traffic in human beings and begar and other similar forms of forced labor. 23 says that all these are prohibited, and any contravention of this provision shall be an offense punishable in accordance with law. So if you look at it from a larger perspective, there are connection between these three provisions: 17, 23, and 24. 17 talks about abolition of untouchability. It is within bracket. Bracket has its own significance, meaning thereby it is talking about that practice which has, customary sanction and not other categories of untouchability. Second is 23, where it talks about forced labor, where it talks about begar, where it talks about trafficking. And third one is child labor. Now there is a connecting thread between all three provisions. What is the connecting thread? The connecting thread is that the practices, the activities which these three provisions talk about, they are expected to be taken up also by private individuals. It need not be only through the state or agencies of the state. And in order to eliminate those practices, it was clearly indicated that let it be considered as an offense. But that was not the case with Article 24. 24 does not talk about treating the violation as an offense punishable under the law. नहीं लिखा, प्रेमर्स ने नहीं लिखा. जबकि 23 और 17 की तरह ही 24 भी प्रोविजन है जहां पे ना केवल स्टेट इन्वॉल्व होती है बट प्राइवेट इंडिविजुअल्स भी इन्वॉल्व होते हैं. चाइल्ड लेबर केवल स्टेट इंगेज नहीं करती है, या हो सकता है स्टेट ज्यादातर नहीं करती है, प्राइवेट इंडिविजुअल्स ही करते हैं. और इसके वजह से प्रोविजंस के सिमिलैरिटी के वजह से उसको भी पनिशेबल बनाना चाहिए था, लेकिन फ्रेमर्स ने नहीं बनाया. और बनाने के और भी रीजंस थे, क्योंकि साथ में फ्रेमर्स ने 45 लिखा. 45 में एजुकेशन को एक राइट की तरह माना. लेकिन notwithstanding this, they have decided not to make it punishable. And why? To me, it appears to be getting guided by the reality of that time, that child is needed to supplement the income of the family. चिल्ड्रन की जरूरत है परिवार में फैमिली के इनकम को बढ़ाने के लिए. फैमिली बिजनेस में जरूरत है उनकी. Had it been abolished at that point of time, had it been made punishable at that point of time, we would have not taken up the debate today that how education and child labor can go together. I see that there's a question, there's a hand which has been raised. I prefer to take it because let it be an interactive session. Yes, please.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Please, and Article 70 once again.
Article
17.
17, if you look at it, you find untouchability is within inverted comma, isn't it? In fact, the only provision where we find it is in inverted comma, because it is signifying a specific kind of untouchability. Now, untouchability is of many kinds, isn't it? Someone who is suffering from infectious disease is also considered as untouchable, as we are experiencing today, isn't it? If someone is found COVID positive, there is a direction that do not go near to him. It is also a form of untouchability, but 17 does not cover this kind of untouchability. कोविड पॉजिटिव हो जाने पे भी लोग उनको मना कर रहे हैं ना कि भाई आप अपने आप को आइसोलेट करो. दैट आइसोलेशन आल्सो अमाउंट टू अनटचेबिलिटी इन अ वे. But 17 is not connected with this kind of untouchability. 17 is connected with what kind of untouchability? Which has its genesis in caste, which has its genesis in, in kind of customary sanction. 17 covers that kind of practices.
How this is related to child labor?
Sorry?
How untouchability connected with child labor?
What I am highlighting is that how I connected it. You missed the point. I am explaining it again. If you look at part 3 of the Constitution, there are certain rights which are spelled out. Apart from that, there are certain directions which have been given to the state also in part 3, which is unconventional. You would not find any constitution in the world having this kind of arrangement. In the chapter of fundamental rights, you will find only fundamental rights given. But one for Indian Constitution, in addition to fundamental rights, there are general instruction given to the state. 17 is an example of that, isn't it? 17 is giving an instruction to the state. 23 is also an example of that. 17, 23, the plain reading does not per se take you to any fundamental right. It is more in the nature of instruction to the state. Clear? So 17 is an instruction to the state. 23 is an instruction to the state. Likewise, 24 is also instruction to the state. Clear? Now 17 is an instruction to the state, and the makers of the Constitution have said that let it be dealt as an offense punishable under the law. तो मेकर्स ने क्या किया? मेकर्स ने बताया कि भाई आपको क्या करना है, आपको इसको क्रिमिनल लॉ के अंदर ही देखना है. 23 के लिए भी वही किया, बोला कि भाई अगर ट्रैफिकिंग इन ह्यूमन बीइंग हो रहा है, अगर फोर्स लेबर हो रहा है, तो आप इसको क्रिमिनल लॉ में डील करो. 24 में भी कहा कि भाई चाइल्ड लेबर एम्प्लॉय नहीं होगा फैक्ट्री में, माइन में और हैजार्डस एम्प्लॉयमेंट में. वहां पे इंस्ट्रक्शन है स्टेट को, लेकिन वहां पे मेकर्स ने ये नहीं बोला कि भाई इसको भी क्रिमिनल लॉ में डील करो. So this is how I'm connecting 17, 23 and 24. And this is how I am highlighting the changed stance of the makers while dealing with child labor. And why this changed stance? Because engaging the child in the employment was an economic necessity at that point of time. I don't know if it is the case even today. Looking at the number, looking at the census data, it appears that even the sorry state of affairs even prevails as on date. And more so, you feel this when you find more and more child artists being promoted by the entertainment industry. So this is how I am connecting. Let me elaborate a bit more on this. Why there is a connecting thread? Because, as I said, these three provisions are not only directed towards the state alone. Untouchability केवल state नहीं करता है, private individual भी करता है. Trafficking in human beings केवल state नहीं करता है, private individual भी करता है. Child labor केवल state नहीं करता है, private individual भी करता है. And what you call it in legal languages, horizontal application of rights. Rights जब आप देखते हैं ना, तो rights का traditional understanding है, rights को हमेशा state के against देखा जाता है. That's why we read that rights are to be enforced only against the state. जो लॉ के स्टूडेंट है वो आर्टिकल 12 को यहां समझेंगे, जहां पे स्टेट को डिफाइन किया गया है। दैट स्टेट मींस पार्लियामेंट, state legislature, state executive and central executive and other authorities and local authorities under article 12. इसको बोलते हैं वर्टिकल एप्लीकेशन ऑफ राइट्स, जहां राइट्स को आप स्टेट के अगेंस्ट इन्फोर्स कर सकते हैं। कई दफा यह कहा गया है कि केवल स्टेट के अगेंस्ट इन्फोर्स कर सकते हैं। इसीलिए जब रिट पिटीशन फाइल होती है सुप्रीम कोर्ट में प्राइवेट एंटिटीज के खिलाफ, तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट कहती है कि 32 में पिटीशन इंटरटेन नहीं होगा, क्योंकि जो वायलेट कर रहा है राइट वो प्राइवेट पार्टी है, स्टेट नहीं है। इसीलिए सुप्रीम कोर्ट सजेस्ट करती है कि आप हाई कोर्ट जाइए। द लॉ स्टूडेंट शुड अप्रिशिएट, बीसीसीआई के केस में यही हुआ। जब बीसीसीआई के केस में कोर्ट ने बोला, कोर्ट के पास पिटीशन गया, कोर्ट ने बोला 32 में मत आइए, यू गो अंडर आर्टिकल 32, एंड दैट्स व्हाट इज हैपनिंग विद मेनी प्राइवेट एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन। मैटर इज बीइंग टेकन अप अंडर आर्टिकल 226 ना। अब वर्टिकल एप्लीकेशन ऑफ राइट्स के साथ साथ हॉरिजॉन्टल एप्लीकेशन ऑफ राइट्स की भी बात होती है। हॉरिजॉन्टल एप्लीकेशन मींस वेयर यू लुक एट द ऑब्लिगेशन नॉट ओनली विद द स्टेट अलोन, यू आल्सो लुक एट द ऑब्लिगेशन ऑफ द नॉन स्टेट एक्टर्स। नॉन स्टेट एक्टर्स में इंडिविजुअल भी आते हैं, मल्टीनेशनल कॉर्पोरेशंस भी आते हैं। जैसे आप इन्वायरमेंटल लॉ के केसेस पढ़ेंगे तो वहां पे आपको हॉरिजॉन्टल एप्लीकेशन ऑफ राइट्स नजर आएगा, क्योंकि बहुत सारे केसेस जो है प्राइवेट कॉर्पोरेशंस के अगेंस्ट फाइल होते हैं। सो 17, 23, 24 में एक कनेक्टिंग थ्रेड है। व्हाट इज दिस कनेक्टिंग थ्रेड? दैट द सब्जेक्ट मैटर इज इंडिविजुअल एंड नॉट नेसेसरली द स्टेट, ऑल्सो द प्राइवेट इंडिविजुअल्स। बट देन 24 में उसको उस तरह से डील नहीं किया गया है। सो चाइल्ड लेबर में मेरा मानना है कि देयर इज अ मिस्ड अपॉर्चुनिटी बाय द फ्रेमर्स। मिस्ड अपॉर्चुनिटी इसलिए भी है, जब आप 45 के लैंग्वेज को देखते हैं। 45 का लैंग्वेज क्या है? इफ यू लुक एट इट, it says, I mean, it has been changed now. Let me look at the article 45 prior to the amendment. Just give me a second. Let me. What was the provision? That the state shall endeavor to provide within a period of 10 years from the commencement of this constitution for free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14 years. ये ओरिजिनल 45 कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में था। जब 86th अमेंडमेंट आया, जिसमें राइट टू एजुकेशन को फंडामेंटल राइट बनाया गया, उसमें 45 को चेंज किया गया 2002 में। एंड व्हाट इज द लैंग्वेज नाउ? इट सेज द स्टेट शैल एंडेवर टू प्रोवाइड अर्ली चाइल्डहुड केयर एंड एजुकेशन फॉर ऑल चिल्ड्रन अंटिल दे कंप्लीट द एज ऑफ 6 years. अप टू 14 को घटा के 6 किया गया। एंड व्हाई इट इज सो? बिकॉज 21 कैपिटल ए में इसको ट्रांसफर किया गया। 21 कैपिटल ए says the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years in such manner as the state may by law determine. Look at the drafting. Original 45 says up to the age of 14. It has not made the bracket of 6 to 14. It has says up to the age of 14, there shall be free and compulsory education for all children. Or as I said at the beginning, 45 is the only provision which you find with a timeline. There is a timeline given because framers were aware that education is a potential tool to improve quality of life. Education is a potential tool to make individual autonomous. And education is a potential tool to make the state accountable. But then they have made it in directive principle. They have not included in fundamental rights for the very obvious reason that to provide education, resources are needed, and resource allocation is the task of the executive. अगर सरकार के पास 100 रुपए है तो सरकार ही बेहतर जानती है कि 100 रुपए में 50 रुपए एजुकेशन में लगाने हैं या 50 रुपए में रफाल खरीदना है, वो कोर्ट नहीं बता सकती है. एंड दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई इट वाज पुट इन डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल. लेकिन डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल में डालने के साथ साथ जो है फ्रेमर्स ने इतना जरूर किया कि बोला कि भाई 10 साल में इसको कर डालो. 10 साल में तो अपने रिसोर्स को इस तरह से तुम चैनलाइज करो कि सारे बच्चों को पढ़ा दो. अब वो अलग बात है कि हम 2002 में हमको रियलाइज हुआ कि इसको फंडामेंटल राइट में डाल दो. ऐसे आई पर्सनली बिलीव that it was a sort of dearranging the constitutional scheme, because what was there in Article 45 was good enough to cater the goal, to achieve the goal laid down. No need to make it a fundamental right. आपने ये फंडामेंटल राइट बना के कहीं ना कहीं एक ये इंडिकेट किया कि देयर इज ए हायरार्की बिटवीन फंडामेंटल राइट्स एंड डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल. अगर हायरार्की नहीं थी तो आपने क्यों फंडामेंटल राइट बना दिया? आपको बनाना नहीं चाहिए था. So I mean, it could be a kind of good research topic for the students, that whether 86th Amendment has established the hierarchy between fundamental rights and directive principle. Because हम पढ़ते हैं कि भाई दोनों में कोई अंतर नहीं है, दोनों एक समान है. इनफैक्ट सो मच सो दैट ग्रैन्युले विलियम्स ने तो ये लिख तक बोल दिया था कि भाई ये फंडामेंटल राइट्स और डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल जो है वो रथ के दो पहियों की तरह है. दे आर लाइक टू व्हील्स ऑफ ए चैरियट. और रथ तभी आगे चलेगा जब दोनों पहिए चलेंगे. तो अगर दोनों पहिए थे और पहिए एक समान थे तो ये हायरार्की बनाने की जरूरत क्या थी? But that is a separate debate altogether, and perhaps you can take it up. Now, the point what I was highlighting is this, कि right from the beginning, education was considered as an important obligation for the state. The only deviation the framers have done that instead of placing it in the chapter of fundamental rights, they have placed it in the chapter of directive principle. And for that, you need to trust the framers. Framers ne kuch garbad nahi kiya. They have not. Why we need to trust? Because they were aware of the fact that to educate people up to the age of 14, you need resources, you need money, and let it be the subject matter to be dealt by the government. Let not court interfere. Had it been in 14, had it been under part 3, 32 would have come into picture. अगर ये फंडामेंटल राइट्स में ले आते तो 32 में सुप्रीम कोर्ट को जुरिडिक्शन मिल जाता. So if there is any violation of any fundamental right, Supreme Court would have taken it up. इसीलिए फ्रेमर्स ने बहुत सोच समझ के इसको डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल में डाला. And they made it very clear. Because they thought that government works on trust and confidence. Government should not be seen as working only on the directions of the Supreme Court. अगर ऐसा होता तो law should have solved all the problems of the society. But law सारी society के सारी problem को law नहीं सुलझा सकती है. Law is one of the tools to solve this problem of the society. There are other tools also available. So very significant intervention done by making it one of the goals to be achieved and with a defined timeline. Unfortunately, these questions never take the center stage in building a political agenda of this country. That अगर 10 साल का समय दिया था तो why it was not done? Let the government come up with a white paper. या पैसे नहीं थे, क्या reason था? Let the government explain to the people. And that's what even Ambedkar said when it was asked to him कि आप इतने सारे important provisions directive principle में डाल रहे हैं and they are not enforceable in the court of law, so how the accountability will be ensured? Accountability कैसे ensure करेंगे आप government की? अंबेडकर ने बोला कि कोई जरूरी नहीं है कि सारी accountability court of law में fix हो. कुछ accountability people's court में establish होंगी. Government को explain करना पड़ेगा कि भाई क्यों नहीं किया people के सामने. But explanation कुछ और होता है. Why the issue pertaining to child and children education has not become central focus of political agenda? Is it because they are not the voters? In order to make them central narrative, in order to make them the main narrative, you need to reduce the age of voting. अभी कर दीजिए आप 6 साल, देखिए कि तुरंत पॉलिटिकल एजेंडा में आ जाएगा. So as a law student, as an informed citizenry, these are the questions which are to be asked. Moving further, there was an important intervention done by the court in Mohani Jain case, in Unni Krishnan case, where the court declared right to education as part of right to life. Interestingly, the case was pertaining to capitation fee. Higher education का case था, लेकिन court ने फायदा उठाया. Court has said right to education in at the primary level should be part of Article 21, because you cannot visualize a quality life unless and until you fulfill the dream of getting educated. हर बच्चा पढ़ना चाहता है. That is the dream. So life cannot be disconnected with that. So in that regard, Unni Krishnan judgment of the Supreme Court played a significant role. Now, many a times I generally say this to the law students, that many a time Supreme Court judgment also to be seen as initiating a public debate. कई बार हम लोग सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट को केवल इस तरह देखते हैं कि वो कितना लागू हुआ, कितना नहीं लागू हुआ, बट सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट को इसके बियॉन्ड भी देखने की जरूरत है। कई बार सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट जो है पब्लिक डिबेट को इनिशिएट करते हैं। हो सकता है इमीडिएटली इंपैक्ट नजर ना आए, नो, लेट्स से फॉर एग्जांपल द जजमेंट ऑफ द सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑन राइट टू प्राइवेसी, Supreme Court judgment on Sabrimala temple, instances of initiating a public debate, Supreme Court judgment on, corruption in electoral process. So that's how I see those interventions made by the Supreme Court in Unni Krishnan or Moni Jain, that it finally culminated into constitutional amendment इंट्रोड्यूसिंग 21 कैपिटल ए। बट आप 21A को देखिए और 45 ओरिजिनल 45 को देखिए, 21 इज ए कंडीशनल प्रोविजन एज मेड डिटरमाइंड बाय लॉ। पार्लियामेंट को डिस्कशन दे दिया, पहले 45 में नहीं था। फ्री एंड कंपल्सरी वाज सर्टेनली सब्जेक्ट टू इंटरप्रिटेशन। So there is a case of dilution. And then we know that a law has been made in pursuant to Article 21 capital A, and that law provides for free and compulsory education. Critique says that it does not talk about quality education. But then it certainly
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है।
It certainly, started the process, at least that's what is the case. Quality education की बात करता है नहीं करता है, but there is a beginning done, and we need to look at it, in that way. Inclusive education की भी बात करता है, neighborhood schooling की भी बात करता है. There are provisions. Obviously, that is not the mandate of this session, so I'll not get into that debate. But there is a law which has been made in pursuant to 21 capital A. So now the Constitution acknowledges as a fundamental right that there shall be a free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years. And Supreme Court has also clearly spelled that the obligation under 21 capital A is an obligation of both state and non-state actors. Private schools के ऊपर उतना ही obligation डाला है. Be it the case of Rajasthan or Karnataka case, the court has very clearly spelled out that obligation जो private schools के ऊपर है वो उतना ही constitutionally valid है. That is a very good development in furtherance of the very need of expanding the reach of fundamental rights, which I was talking about, horizontal application. because it is the nature of right which is more important for the fulfillment of the requirement of dignified existence. जहां से भी वो थ्रेट है वहां पे वो ऑब्लिगेशन आना ही चाहिए, बी इट द स्टेट, बी इट द नॉन स्टेट एक्टर. एंड नॉन स्टेट एक्टर कितना सिग्निफिकेंट रोल प्ले कर सकते हैं ये सारे इश्यूज में, इट इज वेरी मच विजिबल दीज डेज. Look at the way the private schools have been spread. And interestingly, some of the private schools are known as public school. But then their presence is now integral and also indispensable. So very rightly, the Supreme Court has made them as part of obligatory scheme under Article 21 capital A. Yes, Mr. Nadeem, you have some question or comment or observation?
Yeah, sir, thank you so much for having a beautiful session on children and Indian Constitution. सर मेरे दो सवाल हैं. पहला सवाल ये है, जैसे आप आर्टिकल 45 की बात कर रहे थे और आर्टिकल 21 कैपिटल ए की बात कर रहे थे, जहां स्टेट की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है बच्चों को फ्री एंड कंपलसरी एजुकेशन देने की. तो मेरा सवाल ये है कि अगर कोई भी स्टेट अपने बच्चों को एजुकेशन देने में फेल हो जाता है तो क्या इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में उस स्टेट की अकाउंटेबिलिटी है या पनिशमेंट मैकेनिज्म है या नहीं? पहला सवाल ये है. दूसरा सर ये है कि अगर हम पूरे वर्ल्ड के सिनेरियो को देखें चाइल्ड लेबर के संदर्भ में, तो 152 मिलियन चाइल्ड लेबर हैं पूरे विश्व में. और अगर इंडिया को देखें तो जैसे आपने बताया 35 मिलियन चाइल्ड लेबर हमारे हैं. तो 35 मिलियन चाइल्ड लेबर है, इसका मतलब है कि बहुत सारे स्टेट्स अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी को नहीं निभा पा रहे हैं एज पर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजन फॉर चिल्ड्रन. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि उनको एजुकेशन नहीं मिल रही है. सेकेंडली ये है कि मिलियंस ऑफ फैमिलीज माइग्रेट करती हैं दूसरे स्टेट्स में, जो अपने नेटिव स्टेट को छोड़ के दूसरे स्टेट्स में जाती हैं, जैसे महाराष्ट्र, बिहार के लोग महाराष्ट्र में माइग्रेट करते हैं. तो मिलियंस ऑफ चिल्ड्रन जो महाराष्ट्र में जा रहे हैं, तो क्या महाराष्ट्र स्टेट की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि वो एजुकेशन प्रोवाइड करेगा दूसरे स्टेट के बच्चों को? और अगर नहीं करेगा तो इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन उसके बारे में क्या करे? क्या उसकी जिम्मेदारी है? दो सवाल सर. थैंक यू सर.
आपने उसी चीज को सब्सटैंशिएट किया जो मैं कह रहा था कि चाइल्ड लेबर, the very existence of the practice of child labor along with right to education is contradictory. और वो 33 मिलियन का स्टैटिस्टिक्स इसलिए है क्योंकि आफ्टर स्कूलिंग they are allowed to work in family enterprise. तो वो कहीं ना कहीं चाइल्ड लेबर में आ रहा है. स्कूलिंग भी हो रही है, चाइल्ड लेबर भी हो रहा है ऑन पेपर. That's what I highlighted, that it was a missed opportunity. Right from day one, child labor should have been prohibited. 45 should have been there in the absolute language. तो अब ये अकाउंटेबिलिटी, आप जब स्टेट की अकाउंटेबिलिटी की बात करते हैं तो दो तरह से अकाउंटेबिलिटी देखी जा सकती है. एक तो आप जुडिशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन के थ्रू देखिए, केसेस कीजिए स्टेट के अगेंस्ट, रीट फाइल कीजिए, स्टेट अपनी मजबूरी बताएगा कोर्ट के सामने, कोर्ट जो है सेट ऑफ इंस्ट्रक्शंस इशू करेगी, उसके बाद जो है वो फॉलो नहीं होंगे, फिर एक कंटेम्प्ट पिटीशन आएगा, फिर जो है एक उसका कारण आएगा, ये सिलसिला चलता रहेगा. आई मीन आई गिव द बेस्ट एग्जांपल, राइट टू फूड पिटीशन 2001 में हुआ. कई सारे इंटरिम ऑर्डर्स पास हुए, कई सारे इंटरिम एप्लीकेशंस पास हुए. पता नहीं, I mean I will be struggling or you will also struggling to look at the judgment where the court has said that right to food is part of right to life. कई सारे इंटरिम ऑर्डर्स आ गए. दूसरा अकाउंटेबिलिटी वो है जो मैं मतलब हाईलाइट कर रहा था, that the accountability through the non-judicial process where you make this as a mainstream political agenda. Let this be an important narrative during election, because that is also one way of ensuring accountability. Third way of accountability, which I believe is third way of ensuring accountability or somehow fulfilling that, is through this kind of courses where you generate the awareness amongst the people, and then this awareness is going to make an impact on scholarship, make an impact on how the academia is thinking about it, how the civil society is thinking about it, because that is also one way of ensuring accountability, isn't it? So कहीं ना कहीं ऐसा हो गया है कि we always look for accountability towards judicial process. I mean, by invoking judicial process. I would say that there's a need to expand it. अगर आप देखें तो कहीं ना कहीं एक बहुत बड़ा अकाउंटेबिलिटी का मैकेनिज्म आजकल बिजनेस हाउसेस की तरफ से आ रहा है. In order to make their business ethical, because there are some rating being done by the international agencies, they're avoiding to employ child labor, isn't it? क्योंकि बिजनेस हाउसेस की अपनी रेटिंग हो रही है इंटरनेशनली, तो अगर कोई बिजनेस हाउस चाइल्ड को एम्प्लॉय करता है, उनकी रैंकिंग खराब हो जाती है, उनके प्रोडक्ट्स सेट ऑफ कंट्रीज में नहीं जाते हैं. दैट इज ऑल्सो वन वे ऑफ इंश्योरिंग अकाउंटेबिलिटी. So we need to evolve a very comprehensive strategy, I would say, in order to ensure accountability. Now, as far as this migration issue is concerned, I am a firm believer that when it comes to basic amenities, regional factor, geographical location must not be a reason to deprive an individual of basic amenities. Otherwise, the very common identity which citizenship gives us is of no value to us. And we need government for that. Government is needed to channelize the resources for fulfillment of basic necessities. Otherwise, we don't need government. We don't need government to to carry on commercial activities. We need government to enforce the rights. We need the government to for the fulfillment of rights. So regardless of whether the child is is this being whether he is being migrated from one location to another location with his family, or he is staying back in his own native state, all these things is immaterial as long as education is concerned. And that's why perhaps the idea of neighborhood school, that 25%, I believe, is the provision which says that there should be admission given in neighborhood school. आप बिल्कुल कह सकते हैं कि सर ये बातें बड़ी एकेडमिक साउंड होती हैं, but then as I said, that everyone contributes in debating, and debating is very important. Debating is very important to help in building the strategy. So it may sound very academic कि सर ऐसा ग्राउंड पे तो ऐसा होता नहीं है. हकीकत है ग्राउंड पे ऐसा नहीं होता है. लेकिन अगर आप इस नैरेटिव को बिल्ड नहीं करेंगे तो वो जो नहीं होने का स्पैन 10 साल है, वो नहीं होने का स्पैन 50 साल हो जाएगा. So this idea of fulfillment of basic rights and the obligation of the state is to be built on a very strong footing. no compromise. And for that matter, I truly believe that all kind of employment of the child should be prohibited. आप उसको बंद कर दीजिए. You just stop it. Prohibit it. Draw the lesson from Article 17. Draw the lesson from Article 23. Just prohibit it. You will not be losing out. You have a very good amount of good volume of young population to contribute in economic growth of the country. You don't need child labor. So let this two contradictory propositions not to, move parallelly. On the one hand, you talk about right to education. On the other hand, you are also approving one or the other form of child labor. Discontinue this. There's no need to, look for a common space where both of them they can prevail. No need to do that. So that's what would be my proposition. I mean, you may find it little academic, but yes, let the debate happen on this direction. Let child labor of all kind be prohibited. Why only in factory, mine, and hazardous employment? And obviously, in pursuant to Act 2016, law has been enacted. There is an amendment done in 2016, wherein it has been said that any kind of employment is prohibited. But then again, if you closely read it, you'll find family enterprise and all those are left out from that amendment. I see Ranjana madam also raising hand. I believe it will not be a question, but it will be, supplement to my lecture.
एक्चुअली जो आपने बताया उसी के एडिशन में ही है, और जैसा नदीम जी का क्वेश्चन है उसी के ही एडिशन में है जो आपने बताया। तो मैं थोड़ा सा अपना CWC का एक्सपीरियंस इसमें ऐड करना चाहूँगी, जिसमें कि आपने राइट टू एजुकेशन एंड चाइल्ड लेबर दोनों को जोड़ करके बताने की कोशिश की है। सो जब हमारे पास भी नदीम जी के क्वेश्चन को मैं आगे फर्दर आंसर करते हुए बताना चाहूँगी कि जैसे हमारे पास भी जब इस तरह के बच्चे आते थे, प्रोड्यूस होते थे, जहाँ पे कि एजुकेशन इज़ वन सच थिंग, जिसमें कि मैं 3-4 चीज़ कोट करना चाहूँगी। जहाँ तक कि चाइल्ड लेबर एक्ट की बात है, और जब हम JJ एक्ट को उसके कनेक्शन में देखते हैं, आई हैव अ सेशन, नेक्स्ट सेशन जो है मेरा है JJ एक्ट के ऊपर। जब मैं उसमें आऊँगी तो उसमें और डिटेल में बताऊँगी, बट यहाँ पे चूँकि चाइल्ड लेबर के संदर्भ में बात हो रही है तो मैं सिर्फ जोड़ना चाहूँगी कि इवन जो JJ एक्ट में भी जो उसको डिफाइन किया गया है, सेक्शन 214 के अंदर में डिफाइन किया गया है, उसमें कहा गया है कि जो उन बच्चों को हम CLCP देख रहे हैं जो कि चाइल्ड लेबर के इन कंट्रावेंशन आ रहे हैं, यानी कि चाइल्ड लेबर एक्ट के तहत आ रहे हैं। बट अगर हम देखें तो चाइल्ड लेबर में तो एक एज डेफिनेशन बनाई गई है कि उस डेफिनेशन में हम चाइल्ड लेबर को देख रहे हैं। और जैसा अभी उदय ने भी बताया कि जो ये आंकड़े दिखा रहे हैं, उन आंकड़ों में बच्चे स्कूल में जा रहे हैं और उसके बाद में वो घर में काम कर रहे हैं। बट इवन जो 16 to 18 के भी सिनेरियो में आ रहे हैं और जो जिनकी एजुकेशन फुलफिलमेंट नहीं हो रही, जो इवन RTE के सिनेरियो में नहीं आ रहे हैं और चाइल्ड लेबर करते हुए पाए गए हैं, JJ एक्ट ओवर आर्किंग एंड उस चीज़ को देखते हुए उन इश्यूज और उन कंसर्न्स को भी लेती है एंड उसमें भी इंश्योर करती है कि बच्चे की एजुकेशन, और अगर हजार्डस एंड नॉन हजार्डस कौन सी कैटेगरी में है एंड उसके तहत उसको वो सारे सुविधाएं मिले, एंड जिस भी कंसर्न स्टेट से आया है वहाँ उसके मेन स्ट्रीम होने की पूरी प्रोविजंस इंश्योर की जाए। दैट इज़ वन। दूसरी चीज़, लास्ट ईयर कोविड के सिनेरियो में जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट का डिसीजन हुआ था कि मैक्सिमम चिल्ड्रन को रीस्टोर किया जाएगा, ताकि जहाँ जहाँ ये अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ है कि बच्चे अपने फैमिली से जुड़ सकते हैं, वहाँ वहाँ उनको रीस्टोर करने की कोशिश की जाएगी। एंड इस कंसर्न में अ लार्ज नंबर ऑफ द चिल्ड्रन हैव बीन रीस्टोर्ड टू देयर नेटिव प्लेसेस। डेफिनेटली सिर्फ उनको रीस्टोर करना वाज नॉट वन इश्यूज, और इसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट का ये भी था डायरेक्शन कि इन बच्चों की एजुकेशन भी इंश्योर करनी है. And in fact, I have also done follow up with some of the states and have ensured also this thing कि ये जो समझ में आया और जो पता भी चला कि जो बच्चे रीस्टोर हुए थे उनकी भी वो फॉलो अप की गई एंड इंश्योर किया गया कि दे शुड बी इधर या तो कंटिन्यू करें जहाँ स्कूल में गए थे, या अगर ड्रॉप आउट हुए तो उनका फिर से एडमिशन हुआ करें. बट इसकी कितनी गारंटी ली जाए कि वो जा रहे हैं कि नहीं जा रहे हैं, दैट इज अ गुड क्वेश्चन. एंड इंश्योरिंग पार्ट जहाँ पे कि DCPU का रोल आता है या NGO कंसर्न का रोल आता है, दैट इज देयर. The third thing, the organization where I'm working, there we are working with Bihar State, and we are working with the CCIs there, जहाँ पे हम institutions में बच्चों के साथ में काम करें, और वहाँ भी RTE के provision supply होते हैं, यानी कि जहाँ पे बच्चे 7 से लेकर के 18 साल तक CCI में हैं. And a very astonishing fact which has came out, and जहाँ पे हमने पिछले 1 year में advocacy की, and now the state has come out with the circular, क्योंकि जब हमने काम करना शुरू किया तो पता चला कि वहाँ बच्चे जहाँ से भी ट्रांसफर होकर के आए थे या वहाँ पे थे, वो बच्चे स्कूल नहीं जा रहे थे. एंड द रीजन वाज द मुजफ्फरपुर कांड, जहाँ पे सेफ्टी एंड द सिक्योरिटी कंसर्न वाज देयर एंड चिल्ड्रन वर नॉट अलाउड to go and even to continue their education. As a result, उन बच्चों का एजुकेशन जो था वो नील था. जब हमने बहुत एडवोकेसी की और इंश्योर करने की कोशिश की, देन अभी रिसेंटली the state has come out with the circular कि though the children cannot go to a school, but they have ensured कि उन schools में government school के teacher जाएंगे और उनकी formal education complete होगी, and as an annual basis उनके exam होंगे, and on the performance basis they will be promoted to the next class. So that's just the addition that I wanted to add here. Over to you, Uday. Thank you.
So when you look at the what is happening at the ground level, when you listen to this kind of experiences, the question which comes to my mind is we really need to work on making the system highly accountable, because accountability is something which is missing from the whole approach. Or even if it is there, the effectiveness of the same is missing, because many times there may be some mechanism let down, but then how effective they are is missing. And that is something which needs to be looked at. When you have a nodal ministry to look after this, when you have nodal agency to look after this, why still the situation is deplorable? Why it is not improving? Is it to do with the power of the nodal agency? Is it to do with the approach? Or is it to do with that there is no way to fix the accountability? So these are the questions, I believe, which requires answer, or where we need to really make a kind of intense discussion to find out the answer. Yes, I see one more hand which is being raised. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. और सर अभी आप बात कर रहे थे ग्राउंड पे, तो मैं एज अ चाइल्ड लेबर जो प्रोजेक्ट है उसमें वॉलंटियर की तरह काम करती हूँ. तो ग्राउंड में जो माइग्रेशन का अभी बात नदीम जी पूछ रहे थे, जो माइग्रेटेड होके पीपल आते हैं उसमें क्या दिक्कत आती है? एक्चुअली वहीं पे बहुत ज्यादा बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है. जब एक स्टेट से दूसरे स्टेट आते हैं तो ना उनके पास मोस्टली जो लेबर होते हैं आधार कार्ड होता है, ना उनका कोई रेसिडेंस का प्रूफ होता है, और बच्चे आके अपने मदर फादर के साथ काम में लग जाते हैं फैक्ट्रियों में, और स्कूल नहीं जाते हैं, कहते हैं हमारे पास कोई डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं है, अगर स्कूल पास में भी है. तो इस वजह से ये जो डाटा है आउट ऑफ स्कूल का और ड्रॉप आउट का ये बहुत ज्यादा इंक्रीज कर जाता है। फिर वहाँ स्टेट के ऊपर एक रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी आती है जो उनको फिगर आउट करे और उन बच्चों को इनरोल करवाए। तो इसमें बहुत ही लार्ज नंबर में लोगों का इन्वॉल्वमेंट जरूरी है, क्योंकि ग्राउंड में आके ये चीजें बहुत ही बड़ी हैं, इसी वजह से डाटा इतना ज्यादा निकल के आ रहा है। थैंक यू।
Yeah, so one way of solving this issue is that, after all, someone is giving the work to the contractor who is engaging this kind of people.
Yes.
Why not
yes.
you rank them, and why not you? I mean, that's what I'm saying. That we need an intense discussion to ensure the regime of accountability. That how to ensure the accountability,
Yes,
because
yes.
some official is giving work to this kind of contractor. These contractors must be a registered contractor. So कहीं ना कहीं सिस्टम जो है उनके प्रेजेंस को वैलिडेट तो करती है। तो वो जो सिस्टम जो उनके प्रेजेंस को वैलिडेट कर रहा है, आई बिलीव, आई डोंट नो, माय एक्सपीरियंस is not at all to work at the ground level, but जितना मैं पढ़ के समझ पाता हूँ या समझने की कोशिश करता हूँ कि ये जो सिस्टम जो इन चीजों को वैलिडेट कर रही है, वहीं पे स्ट्राइक करने की जरूरत है।
Regular monitoring and accountability is missing.
And many a times, even after knowing that where is the wrong happening, situation becomes so that wrongdoer cannot be, really brought to the book. That also, happens, I guess. Okay, so let me come to the last phase of my discussion, which I thought of just highlighting on judicial interventions, that where judiciary has made significant intervention. And in this, I would, classify the intervention of judiciary under different headings. One is certainly the education, where I have highlighted the role of the judiciary in laying down right to free education until the age of 14 years in Unni Krishnan case, in Mohni Jain case. The court also approached the question in a very practical way, where the court has said that obviously the fulfillment of right depends upon the economic capacity of the state. And that's what, even when you look at the language of Article 41 of the Constitution. And same is the case when you look at another landmark intervention done by the court in MC Mehta case, which relates to Sivkasi matches and fireworks industry, where the court read Article 24 and 45 together and said that reading of these two provisions clearly spell out that the children must not be employed in any hazardous industry. And court has also drawn references from international conventions on the rights of the child. And this is, as a law student, you would be glad to know that a very progressive approach adopted by the court on human rights issues, because there are defined way of accepting international law as part of domestic jurisdiction in India. And that is only when that international law has become part of the law through the legislative measures, only when it has been translated into domestic law. But then, for the cause of human rights, the court has not followed this approach, and the court has progressively looked at those international legal regime to expand the ambit of human rights under Article 21. And that is something to be celebrated. Because otherwise, when you look at the legal development, legal provision in India, it always says that there has to be legislative measures to implement the international legal instrument. But for human rights, the court has not followed this. And certainly, one of the beneficiaries of this approach is the issue of welfare of child. And that's what has been seen in the case of this MC Mehta case. ACIAD worker is another important case, which is People's Union for Democratic Rights case. Why this case is important? This case is important because in this case, the Supreme Court has held contractors accountable. So horizontal application of right has been given effect here. And that's why I categorize PUDR very differently and very, phenomenal one, because of the directions issued by the court against individuals, against non-state actors. Court has gone to the extent of saying that Article 24 is enforceable not just against the state, but also against private individuals. And the court, in this case, has said that construction activities are certainly hazardous and expanded the list under the Employment of Children Act of 1938. Another important judgment is laborers working on Salal Hydro Project versus State of Jammu and Kashmir, which is again from the Supreme Court, given in 1983, wherein the court said that central government would persuade the workmen to send their children to a nearby school and arrange not only for the school fees to be paid, but also provide free of charge books and other facilities such as transportation. And then further, the court in this case says, and which somewhere addresses the point which Mr. Nadeem has raised, said that central government undertakes a construction project, then it is the responsibility of the central government to provide educational facilities for the children of the construction workers. Another domain on which the court has made significant intervention is prostitution. Gaurav Jain case is a phenomenal judgment where the court has given an elaborative guidelines to how to address the issue of sexual abuse among the children. The court said that there should be a proper rehabilitation done of the children of prostitutes, and the court, invoking extraordinary jurisdiction under Article 32, laid down a set of guidelines in Gaurav Jain case. Same is the case when you look at the child abuse in Bachpan Bachao Andolan case, where the court, on the issue of rehabilitation, social integration of children working in circuses, the court again said that all kind of employment of children below 18 years of age in circuses is illegal and unconstitutional. And again, in this case, the court has issued a set of direction to the central government for proper rehabilitation. Then there is another case wherein Delhi High Court has struck down a rule where it was provided for a kind of corporal bodily punishment. The court looked into the International Convention, National Education Policy, and said that corporal punishment must not be part of the education system. And in this case, the court has also brought in Article 21 to strengthen the argument based on dignity. Our own independent thought has made an interful, very, very meaningful and very significant intervention when it has approached the court. And on the petition of the independent thought, the apex court, while dealing on the issue of marital rape involving girls of 15 to 18 years of age, highlighted the evils of child marriage and underscored that how sexual intercourse without her consent violates dignity and right to life of an individual. The court has also issued its remark on the language in the Karnataka case, which I was indicating at, Associated Management of English Medium Primary and Secondary School, where the court has said that the choice of language in primary education rests not with the student but with the parent or guardian of the child to decide upon the mother tongue. In this case, the court interestingly also borrowed from Article 19(1)(a) and Article 21, where the court has said that right to choose the medium of instruction either by the parent or the guardian as a part of freedom guaranteed under 19(1)(a). And then on privacy, the court has also said interesting point in Rajiv Kumar case, where in Allahabad High Court, while answering the question that whether an individual who is acquitted in a crime allegedly committed at the age of 10 years, whether he would be disqualified from an appointment for the reason that he has not made the declaration that he was involved in some criminal case. The court brought in the ambit of Article 21 and court has said that right of privacy of a child would be meaningful if such prosecution is not made part of public discourse as a criteria for appointment to public posts or admissions to any institutions of learning, or for that matter, any other transaction in life. And the last one on the adoption, you'd find that the court in cases has in Manuel Theodore D'Souza case, Bombay High Court has given a detailed guideline on adoption of a child, on the issue of interfaith situation. Then Kerala High Court highlighting on the rights of the adopted child in X versus State of Kerala. And then Lakshmikant Pandey, another important case, wherein the court has laid down a detailed guidelines on adoption of child by foreign couples, invoking 142. So the court has filled the gap which was existing in law with the help of the constitutional provision, with the help of Article 142. This is what I thought of speaking to you today on this topic. If you have any question or any comment or any observation, please feel free to ask, or you can drop in a mail to me. That's all. Thank you for your patience hearing. I appreciate that you have joined this session, and I wish you a good luck for all the sessions which would be coming, and also congratulate you for joining this wonderful course, which has been designed by Independent Thought and GLA University together. Thank you.
Uday. Hello.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
So I want to use this opportunity of your presence. One thing which we, when we file petition in the courts, purposefully we keep raising this issue, and I want your comments on this, that part 3 of the Constitution has very, and very consciously, I think the framers of the Constitution didn't mention the word family and parent in the part 3, and children are referred as individuals in the part 3 of the Constitution. We do find mention of the word family and parent in part 4 and I think 4A. And then what we raise is that rights of parents are not absolute. So when we work on the ground, we realize, and even the data substantiate this position, that most of the issues which are harmful to children, be it denial or neglect or even abuse or even crime against them, many of these are done by the known people, even within family members. And then being guardians and custodians of them at least till the majority, they have a lot of control and power on them, which they do exercise at times. So we raise this issue of that parents' rights are not absolute. The relationship of children and state is very direct, and the rights and duty corresponding relationship is there. So I just wanted your comments on this. Thank you.
A very brief observation on this, that how do you see the Constitution influencing the life of an individual? Now, traditionally, it has been seen that the Constitution needs to deal on the aspect between individual and the state, because the very idea of Constitution came up with this, that to limit the power of the state. And then gradually it also started addressing the issue of welfare of the people. Now, in this aspect, are we also accepting the disturbances created by the non-state actors, including the family or the known one? I believe you are highlighting on this issue, that what was originally considered to be exclusively between the state and the individual, now it is getting expanded, and the harm is to be seen not only in these relations, but harm to be seen also between individual and other non-state actors. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is that you expect from the state to provide a necessary legal order so that conduct of an individual either be regulated or be penalized if it is not as per the norms created by the state. Other is, along with the state, you also create a norm for those individuals to whom you see as possible threat to the welfare of the child. Now, the idea what you are building is somewhere taking me nearer to the Western idea, where child has been seen as an individual, as an autonomous agent, and the welfare of the child is to be seen from that perspective alone. I really do not know whether we can really say with all certainty that family or the one who is acquainted with who has the acquaintance with the child should also be dealt under a legal instrument on the issue of child welfare. I mean, it is very difficult to say with certainty. The reason being, how do you describe the attributes? Where you'll draw the line? Because law works on that parameters. And in that regard, to me, society also plays a significant role. And perhaps that's the reason why you find, as you have rightly indicated, the distinction laid down in part 3 and part 4. Because part 4 of the Constitution is largely on the welfare goals. And for fulfillment of welfare goals, the state alone is not to be made responsible. Everyone needs to contribute. One, for fundamental rights, the larger responsibility is on the state. Because the state is being seen as the violators of the fundamental rights. So to say with certainty that can that be also a subject matter of legal regulation, I have my own apprehensions. Maybe we need some more empirical study to come to this conclusion. I mean, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you, Dev. Thank you. Any questions? We are approaching 2 hours time. So if there are any questions, otherwise we can close the session for today. Regarding, are there any questions? So I think Sunday's silence. So regarding one question raised about
when we give lecture to our students, I mean, though obviously in this audience all are not students, as I see, silence always gives a kind of extreme satisfaction to the teacher, that your lecture is so lucid and so grounded that there was no question in the mind of the student. So I take this as a compliment.
No, it was a wonderful session, and I think it was both insightful and broadened the way people will look at Constitution and children now. So thank you so much.